Now, some mutations might require arguments. Here we got the increment mutation, and the value by which we increment this is hard-coded into this code. We could add an increase mutation, which also gets the state, and say that in here we also want to change the counter, but we actually want to increase it by a value which can be defined when this mutation is committed. And to also allow for this scenario, your mutations actually also take a second argument, a payload, so a data package that can be appended. And I'm going to name the argument payload here, though of course these names are up to you ultimately. Now, payload can be anything. It can be a number, it can be a string, it can be an object. And let's say here we assume it will be an object where we have a value property. But this is entirely up to you. It's your store, your application. You can expect any kind of data on committed mutations. But how could we now call this? Well, let's say in change counter, we say add 2 because that's more appropriate to what happens here. But in app view, I don't want to commit increment, but the new increase mutation. And I want to increase the counter by 10. Now, I still don't want to manipulate the state from inside this component. I still want to use a mutation, but I want to pass this data package to this mutation so that we have some flexibility. For that, commit takes a second argument, which will be the payload, which then later is received in your mutation. So the second argument here, indeed, is also the second argument you can pass to commit. And this can be anything, as I mentioned, a number, a string, but here it should be an object with a value property, because that is what I'm expecting here. I'm accessing .value on the payload in my mutation here. So here I provide a value, and in this case, let's say the value is a number, and it's the number 10. If we now save this and reload, add 2 adds 2, because it commits the increment mutation, but add 10 adds 10, because it calls the increase mutation with a payload that contains this value of 10. So payloads, extra data, can be passed to your mutations. You also got an alternative way of committing, by the way. There's nothing wrong with this approach, but you can also call commit and pass an object to commit. Now, this object now needs to have a type property which holds the name of the mutation that should be committed. But in addition, it can hold as many properties as you want, for example here, this value property. And then it's this object, without the type so to say, which will be provided as a payload to this mutation. So that's simply an alternative way of committing, and it's up to you which approach you prefer. This will also work, as you see here. Now, these are mutations, and the clear advantage is that you move the concrete logic that changes your state into your store. And here, of course, it's very simple logic, but this could be way more complex in the end. And you just commit mutations from inside your components. So you never, and that's really important, you never directly edit the state from inside components. This is not considered a good practice. You should instead use mutations.